Class, for this week, we're going to look at the role of employment law. And so I often call this human resource management and the legal maze. It's probably one of the most important discussion or topics in human resource management. I know that Battaglio always says, ask your lawyer. We'll delve a little bit more into that this week, but please pay a lot of attention this week. If you have questions about any of the terminology or any of the complex situations, feel free to send me an email. So also another thing to consider is commentary feedback. And so do take the time. I do provide that rubric that I provide written feedback. It links back to the exact same criteria that I have laid out in this syllabus. So if you have questions about that, the feedback is provided to help you do better on the next time, or if you did an awesome job the first time, to continue with that trend. So again, this week, human resource management and the legal maze or employment law. So some agenda or questions for consideration for the week. I really want to focus on understanding the linkage between personal priorities and legal interpretations. And so how do our own moral convictions maybe lead us to our own legal interpretation? Second, driving elements of employment law. So who's protected? The notion of protected class, which is really important. And then third are the cases exemplary of a movement towards a cultural competence, or is diversity just a catchphrase? And so one of the Moodle readings this week talks about this movement towards a cultural competence. And so we're going to focus on that as well. So looking at the first question here, understanding the linkage between personal priorities and legal interpretations. And so I really want you to think about how Battaglio argues we have a moral obligation as HR professionals. But what does that mean? How do our personal values link to sifting through the HR legal maze, or even provide a lens into how we define a cultural competence? So our personal values also drive how we treat others. And think about how that impacts our interpretations of an HR manager. So in thinking about some of the driving elements of sifting through the human resource legal maze, it's often a dilemma for HR professionals to effectively coordinate duties due to the various legal guidelines. So I want to focus on some of the driving elements of this HR legal maze. So first and foremost, we have constitutional rights, right? So freedom of association. And so the question becomes, does the presence of constitutional rights for the public sector improve or hinder the quality of public service? And so we have a variety of legislative actions as well. So the first would be the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1991. And so looking at how protecting the rights and prohibiting discrimination. But also linked to this, though, is that discrimination can also be then further broken down to types. So pregnancy, religion, retaliation, disabilities, veterans. I mean, we'll focus more on this later in the semester as well. But again, what happens is that this can often drive controversy, which pushes the HR manager to really know the specificity of the laws to make determination on the rights of individuals within the workplace. Another thing to remember too, protected class. So you have a variety of individuals that are protected, ranging from gender orientation, women, religion, but remember too that one group that is not a protected class is white men, and so this might be an area that we could discuss for discussions this week. Another area that's really important is EEO, the Equal Employment Opportunity and Protected Class. So again, looking at how EEO impacts almost every single HRM activity. So recruitment, training, termination, compensation, evaluation planning, and specifically collective bargaining, which we'll be talking about each of these in the coming weeks. So a couple other things to consider. Linking the legal framework brings us to the question of whether or not the cases this week in our legal framework point towards a cultural competence. And so Ricucci, the Moodle reading, and Battaglio act like this is the saving grace, right? And so diversity is a good thing, or is it just a catchphrase? And so that's something that I really want you to think about, because the cases talk about the good old boys, the individual, the woman that works for the Forest Service, looking at sexual harassment, and then the case of the cancer center, right? And so whether or not diversity is passive or active representation, we have to keep in mind that oftentimes civil service is supposed to work as an advocate for everyone within the organization. So with this said, some concluding thoughts. I want us to begin to consider deliverable 1. I know that's a couple weeks away. The take-home exam has also been posted. I don't want people to feel like they're overwhelmed, but it is, a graduate course over 10 weeks. And so please, if you do have questions, feel free to email me. We can set up a phone conversation too, or we can meet in person. Always here to help. And then next week, we're going to focus on recruitment, selection, and pay. But this week, looking forward to our discussions and also your commentary. Thank you.